Hi, today we'll see a simple HTTP request library like fetch to retrieve the data. So we have here three layers. One is the HTML UI, JavaScript, and the mock API. The mock API will be the JSON server exposing the resources. So let's take a simple use case where a user clicks the button to get the user's data. He will call the internally it will call the get data function in the JavaScript. The JavaScript function internally will use the fetch API library to retrieve the users from the JSON server, that is the mock server. The retrieved users are then passed on to populate the HTML table. Now we will implement the use case discussed. So I have here the data.json with a list of users. So this I will run using the JSON server. So this exposes the user's URL. Okay. Now we have to create the HTML file. Let's say mock.html, and let me create the template. Okay. Then as per the use case, we need to populate the table. We need to click a button, retrieve the data, and populate the table. So first let's put the button. Okay. Get data. Okay. And id equal to get data, and so this is the name of the button, this is the id of the button. We'll come to this again later, and then we'll have the table to be populated with the list of users. So the table internally will have the head, and inside the head there will be a row with 4 columns. So let me put the 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what are the 4 columns we have in the JSON? We have the ID, the name, age, and address. So the same thing I'll have it here. ID, then name, age, and address. Okay. Now we need the body of the table, T body, and let's have an ID for this body. T is equal to user list. Okay. So basically we need to populate this body with the user's data. So it will have the rows and the columns. So this is the header, and on click of the button we need to retrieve the data. So now let's create the script source file. So let me create the mock.js, and here I link the same mock.js. Okay, so this HTML is associated with this JS file so that any function in this JS can be called. Okay, now we need to write the on clicking event of the button, right? So I say on click, and I need a function to be called in the JavaScript, which is nothing but get data. Okay, so this get data is a function which will be called in the JavaScript. So let's implement that function. Okay, it will be an async function. Okay, be an async function. So now here I will need to call the fetch API, right? So let response is equal to fetch of. So here it takes the URL and returns the promise. If you see here on the top, the helper. So I'll use the same URL and it returns the promise. So either you can use the dot then or you can use the async await method. So I'll use the async await. I'll get the response, and this response will not have immediately the users. So let users is equal to response dot json function. Now this is again returning a promise, if you say. So we'll await for the users. Okay, so you got the users list. So on click of the button, it gets called, the get data gets called. It in call turn calls the resource URL using the fetch library, HTTP request library, and then it returns the users list. So once we have the users list, I need to create a table, right, with the users. So I'll say create table with users. Now create table doesn't exist, function definition. So I have to create the create table and argument for that is users, right? Now I have to create the table. So how do I create the table? We have here the table head, the table body. Please note this ID, user list. So we need to populate the rows inside the T body. So let's take this ID, come here, go to get this table body first. Let user list is equal to document dot get element by ID of user list. So we got that particular section, the T body. Now we have the input as users. Users is an array, right? So we will iterate the array, create a row for each of the user, and also create the column and populate the cells. So how do we do that? So for each user, users dot for each. Okay, that means here it should be user, and this I already users is an array. So here you see we iterate users list, and for each user we need to create the table row, right? And also the columns. So let row is equal to user list. User list is the body, table body, right? You have to create the row inside the table body. Insert row. Okay, now you have the row. So you created a row in the table body. So user list is your table body. And here you are creating a row in table body, right? Empty row. Now in the row you need to create the 4 columns. For each row you need 4 column values. So let cell 1 is equal to row dot insert cell of 0. So this is your first cell. Okay, like that we'll have 4 cells created, 2 3 4. So let me renumber it 2 3 4, and here also the numbering will be changed 2 1 2 3. It's a zero based index, so you have this. Now you have an empty row and empty cells with 4 cells. Now you need to put the content into each of the cell, right? So now put the content of user in each cell. So how do you do that? You put cell 1 dot text content is equal to user dot id. That is what is here, right? Then name, age and address. So this is the first one. I'll copy paste this and renumber the others 3 4. Okay, so here I'll change the cells to 2 3 4. So each cell content I have to, and here everything cannot be user id. So first one had id, second one had name, age and address. Name, age and address. Okay, now let's see. So here to summarize, we had the button here. With a click you will call the get data in the JavaScript, right? The get data in the JavaScript will call the fetch library, which in turn will call the JSON server and retrieve the users. Okay, so the list of users is passed to create the table. In the table we retrieve the table body, and in the table body we are creating the rows for each user and populating each cell. Okay, now let's run and see how it's behaving. So I have here id, name, age, address. Now nothing is shown. Now I need to click the button. The data has come, right? Now let's little format this table with a border equal to 1 so that it becomes more explicit. Okay, so this is how we retrieve the data using the mock API and display it in the HTML table. Thank you.